that you can reach us. You know, Winsor has technical support, but you can also just message us on the TFAC NA account with any questions that you have there as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So I have my setup. If you guys have your own orange, you can look at your own orange, or you can look at mine through the camera. Either way, it will be okay. Sometimes it's nice to have it right in front of you in real life, but. So I'm just going to make sure those are set up pretty well there. So this is just one that I had done previously. And then I'm going to kind of take you through just mixing the colors with the colors that you are provided. When we're mixing the colors, we're going to go for breaking, like if we squint at the orange, or if you have an orange in real life, if you squint at it, you should be able to kind of break down the colors and the shadows. So that you can separate them a little bit more. So we're not going to mix too many colors to start off with. So the main color, like right here on the orange, that's called center light. So we're going to make that color first. The highlight color, I'm actually, because this is going to be quite wet, I'm probably just going to do the highlight with white with like a little bit of yellow, but we'll do that later on. The halftone is sort of what comes in between the center light and the core shadow here. So the core shadow, so we'll mix the center light, the core shadow, and the halftone. So the core shadow is that really dark part where you get like a nice like shadow right here. And I'm going to exaggerate that as I paint it, because I feel like when you're looking at mine, I have it pretty well lit here, but through the camera, I feel like the lighting doesn't show up as nicely as it does in real life. So what I'm going to try and do is really exaggerate having this reflective light also here. But the reflective light, I'm actually just going to reuse the center light color, and I'll show you how to do that when we get there. And then we're going to kind of block in the orange, and then I'll go through the background stuff after that. The reason we're going to do the orange first is because the background color that we have is pretty dark. So you know, because we don't want the blue to smear into the orange when we're painting the orange, we'll want to do the orange first and then the darker blue background. Cool. And then, yeah, I guess this demo is being recorded. So if you want to reference it later, then it will be recorded for you. So I have an 8x10 canvas. If you have something, you know, bigger or smaller, you can just like, you know, do the sizing accordingly. So with the size that I have, I'm going to go about life size with the orange that I'm drawing. So when you're starting out, you just want to kind of like mark where you want the side of the orange to be. So I'm going to have it be a little bit off center because I want to have a little bit of room for the shadow. This one was just like a quick study, so I didn't go all the way to the edge, but imagine, you know, you want to position your orange, keeping in mind that you're going to paint all the way to the edge of your canvas. So I'm making a little mark with a pencil here. You could do this also with your paint if you don't have a pencil around. Just like use like the tip of a brush or a smaller brush to do that. And then I'm going to find like the approximate width that I want the orange to be. So I've made a mark here and here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure my orange in real life. So you want to keep your arm really straight, and you can use a pencil or a brush to do this, and close one eye. And then you can take the measurement of the width of the orange, and without bending your elbow, switch your arm so that it's going the other way, and compare the height and the width. So you would see which is longer. So my orange is a little bit taller than it is wide. And then obviously keep in mind that my camera here is pointing down. So it's going to make my orange look a little bit more rounder from your point of view. But from mine, it looks like it's a little bit taller. So then I'm going to mark where the bottom is. I'm going to take that measurement and then go a little taller there. So that will make my width a little bit smaller than the height. So once you have kind of like the size of your orange marked out and how big you want it to be, just kind of check it out and make sure that it's the size you want it to be. And then you can sketch. You know, if you're using a pencil, go really light. If you're using paint, it won't matter too much. You could just use like a little bit of orange paint and then it'll just blend in when you're painting it. And then I'm also going to check out the angle. So the angle of my orange is like this. I could even kind of give myself a little bit of an angle mark to show the angle of the orange. And don't worry if the shape that you're drawing isn't perfect, because you're going to have a lot of time to be able to kind of tweak the shape as you paint the orange and as you paint the background. So I'm just kind of getting the general kind of shape on there. So we'll notice that it's not like a perfect circle. It like it angles a little bit at the top there. I'm also going to kind of show where the stem is going to go. So I'm going to lightly kind of put in where the stem's going to go. If you want to measure that out, you could just measure from the top of the orange and then count how many times that goes down. Or you can just kind of eyeball where that's going to be positioned. So you just want to make sure that there's like an appropriate amount of space here and an appropriate amount of space on either side there. And that it doesn't look too big or too small. All right, so then I'm going to pull my palette over so that we can start pre-mixing colors. If anybody has a palette knife, you can use that to mix color. If you don't have a palette knife, you can just use a brush. But for mixing large quantities of color, having a palette knife is really, really helpful. So for the lightest color on, for the center light right here, I'm going to use the yellow that we have there. So you guys will have the cadmium free yellow. And then just to kind of talk a little bit about the cadmium free colors, I'm going to kind of hold this up a little bit closer here. So this is the color that we're using here. So the bottom one is the genuine cadmium and the top one is the cadmium free. So we can see that the cadmium free is actually a really, really good match to the genuine cadmium there. And then same as we go along, let's see, which is the other one we're using. So we're using also Cad Red Deep. So really can't tell a whole lot of difference between the two. So I've actually switched to using cadmium free colors instead of genuine cadmium colors. But you know, obviously the genuine cadmium colors are still going to exist, but we just have this alternative. And does anybody know why we might want to have an alternative for cadmium free colors or for cadmium colors in general? You can kind of take a guess or put in the chat if you know. So one reason is toxicity. So genuine cadmium is made from a heavy metal pigment that's heated. It's like a byproduct of zinc, and that is heated to create different types of yellows and oranges. So the cadmium free actually doesn't contain those heavy metal pigments in them. So they're free of those heavy metal pigments, but are going to be the same quality and are going to perform the same as a genuine cadmium. So it's just an alternative to anybody that doesn't want to have those types of pigments in their studio. But again, that's like, it's definitely personal preference. And I'm actually pregnant right now. So for me, that's like a better option because I don't want to, if I don't have to work with like heavy metals, then I won't, you know. So the other thing, I don't know if anybody has a medium. Oh yeah, and someone also said the environment is another reason. So yeah, like, so, you know, getting those heavy metal pigments down your drain, not really a great thing either, because they can get into the groundwater and it's just not going to be the best thing for the environment. That being said, you don't really want a lot of your paint particles going down the drain anyway. And kind of at the end, I can talk about cleaning up in a way that's going to be best for the environment. But that's a really good point, is that there's some pigments that are going to be more dangerous to the environment than others. And then for medium, I'm going to be using cold pressed linseed oil. If whatever oil painting medium you have will work though. I would recommend, if you're using solvents, to use the Liquid Original, because that one is just like a really nice painting consistency to make your paint a little bit leaner. And it also dries really quickly, so it'll speed the drying time by 50%. I'm not using this right now though, because I'm pregnant, and I'm not using solvent right now. So I'm just going to be using a very, very small amount of medium. And with it, if you don't have a medium, no big deal. If you're just starting out, you don't have to use a medium. But if you want to continue oil painting, it's a nice thing to incorporate into your painting. So starting out with that yellow, I'm going to take just a little bit of the Cad-Free Red Deep. And what I want to do is create a light orange color. And I might actually split this in half, so some of it can be my halftone color there. So I'm going to take quite a bit of that yellow. So I'm making a more like yellowy orange color. Once I think I'm getting close to the color that I'm trying to make, I'm going to hold up my palette knife or my brush or whatever I'm mixing with and checking to see if it matches. And so we can see through the camera that it seems to match pretty good right now to that center light area. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that color. I'm actually going to add just a touch of white into it too, just to make it a little bit lighter. So generally when you're mixing, you want to start with the either the base color or the lighter color first. So that's why I started with the yellow and added the red into the yellow. Okay, I think that'll be good. So then I'm making a pretty big pile of paint, but you know, my canvas isn't huge, so I probably don't need a whole lot more than that pile of paint. If your canvas is a lot bigger, or your surface is bigger, you probably want to mix a little bit more than that. If it's smaller, you may not even need to mix that much, but I would still probably make about that much, even if you have a really small canvas. So then for the halftone color, this one that I made up, actually that will probably do pretty well. So I might just kind of add to this just to make it a little bit more paint. So as I'm taking red to put into this, I'm just taking a tiny bit on my palette knife, because I know that it's going to be really strong and it's going to tint that color pretty quickly. And then remember, as you're mixing, you can squint and it'll kind of help you separate the colors that we're seeing here. So now you're going to make the shadow color. So the shadow color is going to be that core shadow where it looks the darkest. So I'm still going to start with the yellow, but I'm going to add a little bit more red into the mixture. And then from here, you could either add a little bit of the blue or the brown. I'm going to add the brown. So blue will actually make orange duller because it's the opposite color. But then I'm seeing a lot of brown in my orange here, so I'm going to actually add the brown instead of the blue, but either will work. And I'm going to make my shadow color a little bit darker than I think it needs to be, just because I can always kind of lighten with the other colors as I go. So I just want to make sure that there's enough contrast. So even though this is matching a little bit darker than what I'm seeing, I'm going to go with it. So get to the point where you have those 3 colors mixed, and then we're going to start painting them in. So this is like a good, thing to keep in mind is like when you start a painting, you don't necessarily have to mix every single color. You just have to like kind of squint and divide out and see which colors are the most important colors to mix. Once you're done using your palette knife, just wipe it off with paper towel. That's the best way to clean it off. So I'm going to come back over to my orange here and put the palette back to the side. And then we're going to start with the light side first. So come in with your lightest color here. If you have a little bit of medium, you can add a touch of your medium into there, just to kind of thin it down a little bit, but you definitely don't have to do that. So really at the beginning, all I'm going to have you do is just kind of really block in these 3 colors first. And we're going to add more detail later on. The cool thing about oil is that you don't really have to blend things, immediately after like you do acrylic, because the oil paint is going to stay wet for the whole time we're working today. So you don't really have to worry about anything drying on you, which is kind of nice. So I think like in one object still life, like an orange, if this is your first oil painting, this is kind of like a really good place to start. And even if you kind of want to do some more oil paintings at home, just kind of like pulling out like a simple fruit, like an apple or a pear, something like that out of your fridge and trying to draw it is like a, kind of a good first object to try. So once that's in there, I'm going to take, and then with the brush too, you don't have to clean off every time you use a color. Because the next color is pretty similar, I'm just going to wipe the extra paint off instead of rinsing it in the solvent or my brush cleaner, because it's not going to affect the next color that I'm using. So I'm going to take that slightly more like middle orangey kind of color that we made there and putting that in the halftone section. So right before where it gets to the core shadow. And I have the lighting I have set up is sort of what we would call like more like classical lighting. So you could do this just by like if you have a lamp or something, just pointing it at the object that you're drawing, and that will give you this like light to dark gradation with a little bit of reflective light. And you don't have to go over, I'm kind of blending a bit, a lot. You don't have to go super blendy like this one that I had done, actually. So this one's actually quite chunky, right? Like everything's not super blended, where some of these ones are a little bit more blended. So it's really up to you and like what kind of style you want on there. So then that's going to transition to the more core shadow. So I'm going to let some of this orange color come back over here. I'm actually going to come back to my light color because I wish I would have used it a little bit more on this side of the stem. So you can always kind of go back and forth. Like if you feel like you needed to do more light, no harm in going back. And then taking that core shadow color and as you're painting, if you're like, oh, that looks kind of too bright, I want to dull it a little bit, feel free to just add in a little bit more brown as you're painting. Again, remember that I'm kind of exaggerating the darkness at first because I'm going to add in a little bit more of my medium orange that we used for the halftone, kind of like as I'm painting it. But really what I want to make sure is that there's going to be enough contrast. Because if your core shadow is not dark enough, your orange isn't going to look very round. And then as I come to the edge here, I don't know like what style of brush you have, but if you have a flat brush, you want to use like the flat side to the edge like this. And that'll help stay inside the shape that you drew. If you have a round brush, use the point to the edge. And if you have a filbert, you know, use the rounded side to the edge. And then as I come down to the bottom here, I'm going to transition so that we can get some of that reflective light in the bottom there. So I'm going to transition back out to like the medium one, and then I'm actually going to probably put a little bit of the lightest one in there too. Again, I'm just kind of wiping that dark color off before I go back to the lightest color here. And it's not going to be as light as it is up there, which is good. And that's just because some of the shadow color is getting into it. But we don't want it to be as light as the center light color. And then as you all have questions, just feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll look up at the chat every once in a while just to see if there's anything that comes up for anyone. And then I'm just coming back with the dark color. I'm not going to really worry about any fancy blending at this point, because we're going to come back and do more details on this afterward. I just want everyone to block this in now, because then when we do the background, when we come back to the orange, if the background smears in, there's already going to be some orange on there, so it won't affect it too much. So once you get to that point, now at this point, you could clean off your brush. Or if you have another brush, you could switch to a different brush. And then we're going to mix some colors for the background. I'm just going to set this to the side so I can put my palette back on here. So for the background color, we're going to mix kind of like a lighter color for right here, a medium color for the background, and then a darker color for the shadow. So that'll just kind of create like a simple depth. If you want to get, if you have like a setup in front of you and you have some like kind of drapery, you could get a little bit more fancy and do that if you feel like you want to. But I'm just going to kind of keep it pretty simple in the background for today. So starting with white and then taking a little bit of that French ultramarine. And I have a little bit of orange that just kind of came from my white, which is good because I'm going to have you add a little bit of orange anyhow. If your background's quite big, remember, make like a pretty big pile of paint. And start with white, because white is going to be the weaker color. So you don't want to go too dark too fast for this. So I'm going to slowly keep adding a bit more blue. So then I feel like I'm not like matching the cloth color exactly, but I feel like this is like a little bit bright. Kind of depends on your preference. If you want to keep it brighter, you know, don't dull it. If you want to dull it down a little bit, just take a little bit of the orange that you made for your orange and pull it over into the pile of blue. You could also take a tiny bit of brown and stick that into the mixture, and that'll just kind of gray down the blue a little bit so it's not as intense. The reason I picked like a blue cloth in general is because it's a complementary color. So this is something also, like if you're kind of experimenting with your own compositions, you could experiment with your object and then using a cloth color that's complementary to the object, or you could make it be more like analogous, and so that it like they kind of like match each other a little bit more. So you can kind of play around with different color combinations, but definitely having the contrast between a complementary color is really going to make that that object pop out a lot. But if we say like had like a reddish pink cloth color, that's just going to give a really different feel to the painting. It'll just make it like a little bit, probably like a little bit like softer, and the object won't stick out quite as much. So then I'm going to make kind of more of a medium one. So we're going to do the same thing, but just using more blue. And I'm also going to use either the orange or a little bit of brown to dull it down a little bit. So we want to make sure that this one looks at least a little bit darker than that one, so like one step. So I'm going to go, I feel like mine are looking still a little too similar together, so I'm just going to darken this one a little bit more. So you notice that like I started with a color that was too light. It's because it's easier to darken it than lighten a dark color that's too dark. If your color is too dark and it's being difficult to lighten it, split the pile in half and add white to one half of the pile. Okay, so I think those look different enough from each other now. So now I'm going to go for the shadow color. So for that one, I'm actually just going to use kind of what's left of the blue gray on my palette knife, and then just the French ultramarine and the brown. So that's going to make me a really, really nice kind of dull, dark blue. And then something I didn't talk about yet is the touchline color. So the touchline, or in this diagram, it calls it the Occlusion Shadow. So basically we just made this color right here is going to be for the cast shadow. So that's this part right here. The Occlusion Shadow, or the touchline, is that line where it gets really, really dark, just as the object touches the cloth. So for that color, I'm actually going to make a black. And to make a black, I'm just going to take, I don't want any white or any other color on my palette knife. So I'm going to wipe the palette knife off. And then just taking brown and the blue without any other colors is going to make a black color. So that one I'm saving just for the touch line. Okay, so I'm going to put this palette to the side and we can start onto the background. Again, just once you're done using your palette knife, just wipe it off. So I'm going to start kind of in the front just because that's where the lighter color is. And I may not completely finish off the background on mine, but feel free to go all the way to the edges. Oh, maybe I will today. I don't know. We'll see how I feel. If you want it to look more like a finished painting, definitely go all the way to the edge. And then as the color moves up, you want to switch to your medium color up here. So that's just going to create a little bit of depth. And then you can come up right up to the edge of your orange. This edge is going to look sharp at first. Don't worry about that. I'll show you how to soften it afterward. Because with oil, like if we were doing this in acrylic, we would have to soften that edge immediately. You know, otherwise we'd have to redo it. But with oil paint, because it stays wet, we don't have to worry about softening it yet. So I'm just going to go around and have sharp edges around everything and then kind of soften everything all at once. And then if you want to go like a little bit brighter in some areas, you know, you can kind of, as the color's still wet, you can blend on the canvas a little bit too. If you just want to add a little bit more of a brighter blue into it, or just have some areas look a little bit brighter or darker or lighter, you can kind of adjust as you go. Because sometimes you don't, you know, you can get a good idea of how that color is going to look, but you don't really know how it's going to look until you see it, you know, on your canvas next to the object that you've painted. And then right behind my object here, I'm going to go a little bit darker with that more medium color. Just because I know that there's going to be, like I'm seeing a little bit of a shadow behind there. It'll also make the object pop out more. But in general, kind of where the light is touching down on the cloth, I want to be the lightest point. And then again, you know, to keep the edge of the orange sharp, just use the flat side to come up to that edge. You know, also as you're doing this, if you feel like the shape of your orange is a little bit weird, you can kind of adjust that. And then you can keep it pretty painterly in the background. Like if you want to be able to see kind of some brush strokes, you can do that. If you want it to be really smooth, you can just wipe your brush and just kind of like smooth out areas. So really up to you how you want it to look. So I'm letting that color come all the way over to this side. And I can let it go like a little bit darker as it comes over to this corner, because if the light's coming from this side, we know that it's probably going to fade to a little bit of a darker color over here. So I'm just kind of that shadow color that we had made. I'm just adding a little bit of that into the medium color and adding a little bit more blue kind of as I go along. And then as for the shape of the shadow, I'm just going to kind of sketch it in with the brush first before filling it in. So I'm going to bring this one down. Let's see, maybe I'll transition to a little bit lighter just before the shadow, so that the we can kind of imagine like the tabletop there. So I want, like, if the light starts here on that side, then I'll have it start at the same point again there. If you feel like you went too dark in a spot and it's hard to lighten it, you can always take paper towel and just kind of wipe away some of the excess paint, and it'll be easier to lighten the area again. And then again, like if we want, so I kind of want to lighten a little bit in front here. So I'm just actually adding, I'm just taking white and kind of just as I'm painting, lightening the blue at the bottom here. So I kind of have a rough area that's designated for the shadow shape. And then I'm going to go ahead and just kind of wipe the lighter blue off and then come to the darkest one that I made. So just kind of blocking in where that shadow is going to go here. And then this is kind of like a common, not mistake, but just kind of like a thing that I notice people do, which is they have the shadow come either too far from the front or too far from the back. So really pay attention to where the shadow is going to start. So I'm noticing if I follow that up, it probably comes from about like right here. So I'm just going to make a little mark where that shadow is going to come from. And I have a little space here. I can come back and fill it in with the lighter color after. But that's just going to ensure that my shadow seems like it's in a good spot. I'm going to come right up to that edge. And then I also want to make sure that the shadow in the back doesn't go too high or too low. So this seems like it should be a good spot, but you can always just kind of adjust as you go. And then you can decide probably the shadow. It kind of depends on your lighting, but your shadow may run off the page, or you may come back with one of the other colors and just kind of round it out. And then the shadow is going to fade out as it goes further out like this. You're going to get a softer shadow as it goes more underneath, like kind of closer to the object. This is where the shadow is going to look a little sharper. So you want that shadow edge at the front to look a little bit sharper, and then it can blend a little bit more as it fades out. So like right here, I'm actually just wiping my brush and then just using a clean brush just to soften. So really, really light touch, soften that edge out. The back edge is also going to be a little bit softer. So I'm not going to finish off my background, but feel free to finish off yours in the edges there. And then you can kind of tweak. I feel like my shape, I need to tweak it a little bit more still. So once you kind of have the main one in there, like I'm going to round it a little bit more here. And then again, just wiping and softening out as the edge goes out. And then I'm going to use kind of more of a like a mixture of the medium color and the darker color, just because I want to go a little bit darker behind right here. And then again, you can always tweak the shape of your orange a little bit too as you're doing the background. So I'm actually just kind of cutting in a little bit there just to kind of round that bottom part a little bit more. So then for the edge, you'll want to clean your brush off again, or if you have two brushes, go back to the brush that had orange on it. So really, I'm just like, you're wanting to clean your brush off completely if you're switching between two very different colors. If the colors are similar, you just need to wipe it. So now we're going to soften some of those edges. So I'm just going to take that, that brush, and it doesn't have any paint on it. I'm just kind of softening the edge. If you have a smaller brush, you could use a smaller brush for this too. But you can also just use the big one like I was using. So this is just going to kind of make the edge look a little bit more natural, rather than like, if you don't blend the edge, it'll kind of look a little bit like a cutout or something. And I'm wiping off the brush pretty frequently so that if it does have blue on it, then I'm wiping the blue off. All right, so once that edge is softened, to make the stem color, just take one of the blues you have mixed up. Probably I think my stem looks pretty light today. So I'm going to take the lightest blue that we had used for this corner here and just put a little bit of yellow into it. And that should, I'm just using my brush to mix just because this isn't like, I don't need a lot of color. Let's see, I think that's going to be a little bit too dark, so I'm going to add a little bit of white into it too. And maybe a little bit more yellow. And then once you're happy with the green color you made, then you can kind of just put that lightest color into the stem. If you have a small brush, use that. If you have like a bigger brush, just either use the corner of it or the tip of it, depending on the shape of it. And then I'm also going to make a slightly like kind of more like a medium green. So taking more of that medium blue, adding yellow to that. And this will work great for, it looks like on mine that I'm looking, I have like a little bit of a shadow side to the stem. So I'm putting a little bit of the darker green on the back side of it. And then in front here, I have, I'm seeing like a really dark So I might take like the shadow color that we made for down here. And I'm just going to kind of touch that in just a little bit where I see that darkest dark. Again, at this stage, we're just kind of blocking things in, so don't worry if it doesn't look perfect or exactly like a stem at this point. You can also take your orange and cut in a few places with the orange color again to kind of shape the stem a little bit. So I'm probably going to just leave it at that for now. And we can always come back there later if you want to add more details. So then next, go ahead and take, I would take kind of more of the medium orange color, and I'm going to kind of work on the edge of the orange a little bit more. So now we're going to kind of start getting into a little bit more detail. So basically, I'm kind of using that brighter, more medium orange on the edge over here, and that's just going to kind of make it look a little bit rounder. So I'm still keeping that that lighter orange on the majority of it, but just kind of at the edge, darkening a little bit. And then again, like down here, we'll use a little bit more of that color. So see how that's kind of starting to round out the shape a little bit more as you do that. And then around the stem, we're going to have a little bit of detail here. So we can kind of see a suggestion of some of those lines that kind of come out from the stem. So take the darker color to do that. So I'm just going to kind of block in where, like, and you can squint for this too, because it's going to be easier to see them if you're squinting. So you don't have to put in every single one, but just kind of the ones that seem the most important to the form. And then as you block them in, they're going to look a little bit cartoony at first, like just like little lines. But what you're going to do is you're going to blend out. So for this one here, I'm going to blend out. I'm going to keep the front edge right here sharp, and then I'm going to blend that edge out the other way. And you can blend to the medium color that you have there. So see how that makes it look like a little bit more like a little bit more realistic, gives it a little bit more form. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other ones. So blending out. And then here too, like the orange isn't actually like around right here. So now you can kind of tweak the shape of the outer edge of it as well. I also am gonna put like a little bit more of a lighter color in a couple spots. So almost like a highlight. So like right here, I noticed that I'm getting a little bit of a highlight. Same with like right here. So I'm just using a little bit of yellow and white, and because there's already an orange base, it's gonna show up pretty well. And then I'm gonna wipe the brush off. And then to make the edge of the orange, I'm actually gonna take a little bit of the background color again. And I'm gonna kind of cut in a little bit here to make that kind of look a little bit more like a bump. So just really subtly changing the shape right there. And I'm seeing that also right here on this side too. So I just kind of want to make that top part where the stem is just like very, very slightly less round, you know, like a little bit bumpy. And if a little bit of orange gets into your background, it's not a big deal. You can just use more blue to kind of blend it out into there. Because what the orange is going to do in the blue is it's just going to dull it a little bit. And then you can do this like shaping anywhere else that you see you want to, like if you want to like round anything out a little bit more, you can either come back with your orange color and pull out the color a little bit more, or you can cut back in with the blue. So you can really kind of tweak the shape to how you want it to be. And then since I have the smaller brush, you can either do this with a small brush or the tip of the brush. Take that really black color that we made up, and then that's going to be right at the bottom where the orange touches. So we don't want to do that anywhere except just right at that bottom. So the reason I refer to this one as a touch line is because it's just where the object touches where it gets darker. So you don't want to let that get too far up or too far to the side. And you just kind of want to blend it out so that it doesn't look like a line. But it should really go just where that object touches down. So then coming back over to the orange, this is sort of a point where you could start adding in any details that you want to add in. And then also, like, if I'm looking at mine here, I think I want to go even, I keep darkening this spot, and I think I even want to make it even a little bit darker. So touch up anything in the background, and then kind of very last, we're going to go into a little bit more detail on the orange. So the highlight color, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning. So just take white and add, make sure your brush is really clean. I noticed that my brush is not clean enough. And if it looks green, don't use that as your highlight color. So make sure you have all, like, if your brush has any blue on it, make sure there's no blue left on it. And when you're going into your white, make sure you're getting just clean white. So we don't want any green or blue or anything in it. Then just take a touch of yellow and add a touch of yellow into the white. And so you should end up with like a white that's sort of tinted a little bit yellow. So then once you have that, you can find where your highlight exists. So I'm seeing it like right here. It's probably going to change a little bit depending on how you're seeing it through the camera, or if you have yours in real life, the highlight might be in a slightly different spot. And then because the orange is bumpy, the highlight isn't going to be just like a perfect like circle or oval shape like it would be if it was like an apple. You can also use this color like if you want to get a little bit more of a brighter highlight up around the stem too. Just use it really selectively, just where you, like if you squint where you see the brightest brights. Yeah, so someone said what do you use to clean brushes? So you could use if you have like a mineral spirit or like a solvent of some kind like terpenoid, use that to clean your brush. I'm using like a non-toxic brush cleaner that's for oil and acrylic brushes. The only reason I'm using that right now is because I'm pregnant and I'm not using any solvents. But either of those will work. And then if you like, you know, are painting, if you're doing this for the first time and you don't have like a solvent to clean your brushes, it'll be fine to leave paint on them for a couple days, and then like you could run out and grab a brush cleaner because the paint's not gonna dry that quickly. But if that's something that you need to get, you can get like a pretty small amount of it, like a solvent, or you know, if you went to Above Ground, they'd be able to help you find one that'll be good for cleaning oil brushes. And then you can actually just keep it in a jar, and you don't actually throw away the solvent because the particles will settle. Like I have some solvent that I'm not using right now in a jar, but basically what happens is after a while the paint particles settle, and then if you want to clean it out, you just dump the solvent into another jar, and then you can wipe the paint out of the bottom of it, and then you can keep reusing the same solvent forever. And I can kind of go over cleanup a little bit more at the end too. And so the other thing I'm going to do is kind of with this really light, I kind of added a little bit more yellow into the white. So I just have like a really light yellow. So I'm kind of just like adding in a little suggestion of some of like the bumps on the orange. And you could do a lot, you could do a lot of the little bumps, or you could just do kind of selectively add them in just to kind of give it a little bit of texture. It's really up to you. And then I'm going to do this also as we kind of get into that halftone and into the shadow. So I'm letting some of that lighter yellow color kind of selectively come into the halftone just to pick up some of like that little bit of texture that's on the edge there. And then same thing kind of going into the shadow. We can let some of the shadow color come up into that halftone color, and then a little bit of that halftone color come into the shadow too. And so not doing this a whole lot, just kind of very selectively letting it travel into the shadow and letting the shadow travel up into the object. You know, also at this point, if you feel like your orange doesn't look smooth enough for your liking, you can come in with like a dry brush, you know, relatively clean dry brush, and just kind of lightly go over some of the edges that you want to look a little bit smoother. Or at this point, your orange might look a little bit too smooth, and then you want to add a little bit of texture. So in my case, I felt like it was a little bit too smooth, and I want to add a little bit more texture. So why don't, at this point, we're getting, I think we have about 20 minutes left. So why doesn't everybody hold up what they have done right now, just so we can kind of see what everybody did? And, you know, obviously we probably won't be like completely finished at this point, but maybe some of you will be pretty close. So if you want to hold them up, I'd love to see. Oh, so awesome. Oh, love it. Great. Really good. Yeah, it's so fun to see how like everybody's turns out. Really cool. So then kind of as we are just kind of finishing up and putting any last finishing touches on them, you can go ahead, and if you have questions, you can go off mute to ask them if you have any questions about like oil painting in general, the project, the CAD free color. So really anything that you have questions about, you know, I can field any of those. Oh yeah, someone said they used like vegetable oil to clean brushes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so some people use linseed oil to clean their brushes. So you don't have to use solvent if you don't want to. If you're not using solvent, I would say when you're adding a medium in, so I'm adding a little bit of linseed oil in, I have to be really careful I'm not adding too much, because if you add too much oil into your painting, what can happen is the surface can do this like weird thing called alligatoring, and basically it will like get like all like weird and scaly on top. So ideally when you're painting with an oil, you're going to use like an oil and a solvent together. But because I'm avoiding solvent, I'm not doing that. So I'm just trying to add a very minimal amount of oil to the painting. Does anybody else have any questions? So I can also talk about kind of cleaning up at this point too. So if you're not done, just leave your palette the way it is. You can kind of scoop your colors that you made into a pile, but they're not going to dry out very quickly. So they're going to last probably a couple weeks So you could still keep working on this painting and have all your colors still mixed. You want to, like they're gonna form probably a skin on top of them like in about a week or so. So what you would do is you would just like use your palette knife and pull the skin off, and then the inside of the color will still be wet and you'll be able to keep using it. You can also get sealable palettes and you can put your palette in that. If you do that with oil paint, it's going to last a really, really long time without drying out. So that's another option too. But if you're not completely finished at this point, don't worry, your colors aren't going to dry very quickly. Once you are completely finished with the palette, what you would do is you would just, if you have a disposable palette like this one, you would just fold it up and dispose of it outside. The reason I say outside is because anything with linseed oil on it, like a rag that's like all rolled up, that has any kind of linseed oil in it, and linseed oil is the binder in the oil paint as well, that can spontaneously combust. It's never happened to me, but it's just like a possibility of something that can happen. So ideally, you don't want that to happen in your garbage can inside your house. So take any like oil waste stuff to your outside garbage. You know, or if you have like a rag laying around, let it dry out like more like unfolded like this, so that like air can get to it and it can dry. It's like mostly when things are like kind of bundled up that there's a danger of that potentially happening. And then someone said, you prefer using Gamsol or linseed oil? So ideally, if you're using solvent, you would use both. So Gamsol is like a solvent, similar to like Sansador or like a low odor mineral spirit. So you would use like 1 part solvent and 1 part oil when you're painting, and you would use a little bit of both, and that would make the most stable archival paint film. If you use something like Liquin, which is my old favorite, but just not using it right now because I'm pregnant, but this is normally what I would use. Liquin is a solvent and an oil already together in a medium. So you don't actually have to add any solvent or anything to this. It's just ready to go right out of the bottle. But yeah, so ideally you're going to be using both a solvent and an oil together, because if you use too much solvent in the painting, what can happen is it will separate the pigment from the binder, and you can get stability issues that way. So the paint can start like cracking, flaking off. You'll get like sunken looking colors. So you don't want to use too much solvent. You don't want to use too much oil while you're painting. Kind of like a good combination between the both of them to thin out your color. Or you can get something like Liquin that has both of those in there, and then you don't have to really worry about the ratio that you're using in. So any recommendations for someone living in an apartment building for cleaning and disposal? Yeah, just make sure that I would make sure you dispose of things like in an outside garbage can, and then just making sure not a lot is going down your sink. So with my brushes, so if you have a palette with paint on it, scrape it off, put it into the garbage can before you're like doing any cleaning. So you can get like those like metal scrapers if you have a glass palette, and scrape it off and put it into a paper towel to take out. With brushes, just clean them off really well with your whatever cleaner you're using and a paper towel. So there's a very minimal amount of paint that's on your brush before you go to the sink and use soap and water, because we want to avoid like pigments going down the drain, right? And then, yeah, so basically any pigment particles you just want, sorry, I'm looking here. I think I got, if there's a question I missed, let me know. So with that one, and then, oh, what about Walnut Alkyd? So Walnut Alkyd is probably more similar. Winsor Newton doesn't have that, but it's probably pretty similar to the liquid. So liquid is an alkyd medium. So that just means that it has solvent in it. So if you're avoiding solvents and you're working like in an apartment building, or if you have like a sensitivity to solvents, or if you're trying to avoid solvents for whatever reason, then you probably wouldn't want to use an alkyd medium. But you know, I usually use them in normal times, but I'm just not right now. A message, CAD free line available now, most colors. Okay, so how do prices compare from the cadmium free colors to the genuine cadmium? So the price point is actually the same. So I think probably some people are probably familiar with the cadmium hue colors. So previously Winsor Newton had colors that were called cadmium hue. So they were also a replacement cadmium, but they were a lower quality. So they actually didn't match that well in like they matched pretty well in the mass tone, but then when you mix with them in like the undertone and the opacity of them wasn't, you know, as comparable to a genuine cadmium. So with the cadmium free colors, they're actually the same price point and the same quality. So there's no difference in the quality between the cad free and the genuine cadmium. Does that kind of make sense? So it's going to be the same price point. It just doesn't have the heavy metal pigments in it. So they're different than the hue colors were kind of more around as like a lower priced option for cadmium colors because they're more expensive. But with the cad free colors, they're going to be that same really high standard of quality and really like close match to the genuine cadmiums. Cool. Are there any other questions? Great. Yeah. Thank you everybody for joining in.
I have a question.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
You're recording this. Thank you. I was interrupted a lot during this session, business, etc. Would you be sending this recording to us by email?
So actually, we will be posting it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, which we can link in the chat there for you. So it'll be up in a few days, maybe on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay, that's terrific. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yes, I just put one in the chat. I actually purchased that underpainting white, and I saw after I got home how toxic it is, and I don't want to use it. I don't know how to get rid of it.
Honestly, someone probably would want it. Is it so? What? Look at the back of it, because sometimes they make the underpainting white in a not like they make a non-toxic version of it.
This one's bad.
This one, so yeah, so if it has a CL on the back, which it probably does, that's the cautionary labeling, which probably means that it contains lead. Most of them are going to have the AP on the back. My titanium white actually doesn't have an AP. This one, you know, with titanium white, you want to, okay, I see. And then go to, so does it have a CL on it? That one?
No. And it
so
just,
I think, let me see the back of it again there.
Oops.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So yeah, ideally, if you're wanting to avoid stuff like that, I wouldn't use that one. You know, all of the whites are going to have this one that basically it's like the dead fish, which means you just want to like, it's not going to be harmful to us while we're using it, but you want to be really careful about how you dispose of it. What I would do is I would just see if somebody if you put it on like online or something, someone may want to use it, because there's a lot of people that still like to use those more traditional whites. But if you're just going to buy one white, I would say titanium white is a good one to buy. With Winsor Newton, they actually use titanium and zinc in the same white. It's mostly titanium and it has a little bit of zinc, and that basically just is going to neutralize it, because titanium can be kind of like warm and chalky. But because Winsor Newton uses like a little bit of that zinc, it just kind of makes it like a little bit more neutral. And I like using it a lot. If you're gonna have two whites, it's kind of nice to have a zinc white as well. That's like more like cool and more transparent white, but it's really hard to tint colors with the zinc white. So you don't want that to be your only white, right? But it's really great to have for like for glazing and stuff as well. But if you're just having one white, titanium white is the way to go. But I would say if you have that one that you don't want to use, then I'm sure someone would want it. You know, some people, different people care more about like the pigments that are in their paint. It just kind of depends, you know, and like also it's sort of like if I'm just like kind of like breathing with the you know the paint, like if I like sniffed a paint tube, that's not going to be really harmful to me because the pigments are encapsulated. But you know, one thing that you would think about is if you're getting paint on your hands and things like that. You know, or if you were using acrylic and you were like airbrushing or spraying a color, then you would want to really think about the pigments that you're using or wear like a respirator. But there's still like a lot of people that are going to use genuine cadmiums and paints that have lead in them. So I'm sure you could find a home for it that someone would appreciate it. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you very much, Kristen. It was a great session.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it was fun. Cool. I'm glad.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to thank everyone for coming today, and to Kristen for leading the demo. I think we all really enjoyed it. That was really great. And look out in your emails later on today. Allie will be sending a 15% off coupon for some great Winsor Newton products. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you again in our next demo. So have a good day, everybody.
Great. Oh, and one last thing, if anybody wants to post their painting that they did, you can tag the TFAC NA on Instagram. That would be cool because I would love to see what everybody created.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Kristen.
Bye.
Bye.